This is lecture on emotions and character. And there's actually just one question at the end on character, but it's a topic that's worth talking about, so I do want to address it. I want to start by reiterating or maybe explaining in a different way why knowing and understanding the emotions is important in making a speech. It's so if you remember several weeks ago, we talked about the different means of persuasion, the Greek words ethos, logos, and pathos. Pathos being this appeal to the emotions. And at the time, I associated, and I noted that Aristotle associated each of those with, vaguely associated each of those with the different types of speech, deliberative, forensic, and ceremonial. And in general, the one that went with ceremonial speeches was pathos. Those are just very generic things. It's not at all, that doesn't at all mean that an appeal to the emotions is not relevant or is less relevant in deliberative speeches. So when you're trying to get somebody to make a decision, I agree with what I said earlier. The most important thing is your ethos, the way you present yourself, your character. But part of it is also how the audience is feeling. And so this has a lot of importance to it. Now, why is that? I want to talk about that for a second. I want to explain that. I hope to explain that by talking about the reading that was assigned on the first day of class, the Boethius reading, the Consolation of Philosophy. Boethius, who is at that moment, Boethius the narrator, as the book starts, who is feeling a certain way, has philosophy appear to him and console him. And philosophy's consolation to him is not, I remind you, is not just this kind of purely intellectual, abstract argument of here's why you shouldn't feel this way. Philosophy herself sings to him and kind of writes poetry for him to make him feel better. And so in doing a task that involves the emotions, even philosophy incarnate, according to Boethius, as he's writing it, correctly appeals to the emotions. So I want to say this for a couple of different reasons. Then I want to do a little bit of philosophy of human nature to explain what exactly we mean when we say the emotions. But what I want to say is appealing to somebody's emotions as you're speaking to them, whether it's a group or an individual or whatever, is not necessarily, and hopefully is not ever, a kind of manipulation. When you are speaking to somebody's emotions, you are speaking to a part of who they are, and a part of who they are that's quite legitimate. It's not like the feelings, there's something like bad or wrong about them. However, going back to what Aristotle said near the beginning of the Rhetoric, is it possible for people to intend to appeal directly and only to people's emotions, and by doing that to manipulate them with some malicious intent? Absolutely. So it's something that you need to be careful about, both about not doing as a speaker and about not falling into as a listener. On the other hand, there's a legitimate use for it, and just because there's an illegitimate or an evil usage of something doesn't mean that that same thing can't be used well. I don't know. Somebody could use a knife to stab somebody and rob them, but you can also use a knife to, cut your vegetables and stuff like that. So just because a knife can be badly used doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Just because rhetoric and specifically appeal to emotion can be badly used doesn't mean itself it's a bad thing. Or not even, it also doesn't mean it's not a necessary thing for many other good purposes. Now, why is it a necessary thing? I want to talk about that for a minute. Or why might it be a necessary thing? What do we mean when we speak of emotions? It's the kind of thing, you know it when you see it. I don't know if I could define it, but I'll tell you when I feel one. Yeah, but I think we can work towards a definition. I'm drawing from some of Aristotle's other works, some of Aquinas' works, some other philosophical sort of texts in talking about this. But I'll kind of make a couple of observations. This is the main thing that I want to impress on you for today's class. The human being has two sets or two kind of sources of perception. I'm going to use the word perception in a very broad way. There are two things in us, I'm going to use the word soul, that perceive. One set of things is our senses. So one of the things that we use to perceive reality is our eyes and ears. We see and hear, and when we see and hear and taste and touch and so on things in the world, we are seeing and hearing and tasting and touching. We are perceiving very particular individual bodily things. I see, I don't know, an apple, or I see a steak, or I see some physical object, and I am perceiving that object with my senses. It's always this very particular thing. But that's not all we perceive. As human beings, we have another kind of form of perception, which is through the intellect. And so we perceive not only these just kind of physical objects in front of us, but we also perceive abstract things. We perceive ideas, if I can use kind of Plato's term for this. And so at the same time, the human being is kind of perceiving two sets of things. There is the physical object in front of us, but there's also, we're also thinking about ideas, and that's a kind of perception. What does that follow from? Or kind of what follows upon that? Because there are two types of perception, there are also two forms of desire. There is the desire that follows upon physical perception, and there's the desire, I'm using the word desire very broadly here, and there's the desire, there's the wanting that follows from the intellectual perception. So I'm gonna give you some examples of this. I think the sense one, the physical one, is the easier one to understand. I smell what would I smell? I smell some fried chicken. Happens to be a food I really like. I smell some fried chicken. That sense perception brings along with it a desire. So the name that a lot of philosophers have assigned to the desire that follows upon sense perception is the passions. Now, broadly, I'm going to call them the emotions. Okay, so our feelings, for the most part, most of what we call feelings, not exclusively, there's other uses of the word feelings, but most of what we call emotions is what's called the sensible appetite, or the sensitive appetite. The appetite that follows from the perception of a sensible thing. I smell the fried chicken. I want to eat the fried chicken. That's the sensible appetite. A lot of our emotions, and maybe most of the time when we speak of emotions, that's what we're talking about. Somebody would see a beautiful woman or an attractive man or something like that, and there would be desire that would fall from that. These are what we call the passions. Kind of traditionally speaking, those are called the passions. Sometimes we call them emotions today. Sometimes we call them feelings. These words sometimes mean the same thing. Sometimes there's kind of slight distinctions. Like, I think when you're cold, it's just like cold outside, or it's hot outside. When you're cold, I think we would call that a feeling. Maybe some philosophers would not call that an emotion. I don't know. Sort of the way you use these words, it's not really important for class today. But when we're doing rhetorical speeches, a lot of what we're appealing to is the sensitive appetite. It's the feelings that people have. They care about certain physical, individual, particular things. People care about their family. People care about even their country. These are kind of emotions that follow from a kind of perceptible reality. Okay. The other form of perception is reason. Reason perceives ideas and truths in an abstract way, but it also has a kind of desiring part, and the desiring part of reason is what we call the will. And so, why is this important? Because in human beings, in a lot of our life, in most of our lives, and this is like applying to the majority of people, there can often be a conflict within us between these two types of perception and the desire that goes along with them. And so, for example, I might have this idea in my mind of health, and I think I need to be healthy, and it's a good thing to be healthy, and my mind perceives that being physically healthy is a good thing. I'll live longer. I'll be able to take care of the people that I care about in a better way if I'm healthy. I'll be able to move around more. I'll have a kind of more energy. And so I have this idea of health, and it's a thing that is good, that I want, that I desire with my will, when my reason perceives the idea of health. At the same time, go back to the fried chicken. With my senses, I perceive the fried chicken, and with my sensitive appetite, I want the fried chicken. So now there's a conflict because fried chicken, as delicious as it is not the healthiest food. And if all things being equal, and if there were no issue of calories or fried food or carbs or fat or whatever, if all of these things were neutral, fried chicken is basically the only thing I would ever eat all the time. But I really do like it a lot. So now there's a conflict because on the one hand, my passions, my sensitive appetite wants the fried chicken and I want to eat that all the time. On the other hand, my will and my reason know that it's not a good thing because it's unhealthy to do that, to eat it that much. Once in a while, it's fine, but that much, as much as I would want to, I would probably die within a week or two. So there's this conflict within us. Now, and I think it's a very, very common human experience. I think it might be the most common human experience. So what does that have to do with speeches? Well, think about this reality that a large number of people, I don't want to say majority, minority, I don't know. I guess it's a majority, but it doesn't really matter. But there's enough people out there that really make most of their decisions based on their feelings. It's once, and I hope a lot of people make decisions based on reason. I think that's a much better way to live your life. That's a much more, I think, virtuous and maybe correct way. I hope people just don't eat everything they feel like eating. They're not going to live that long. It's just not that healthy. You can do it once in a while. You can have ice cream once in a while. But if all you eat is ice cream all the time, that's just bad for your body. You need to sort of make decisions and sometimes not give yourself what you feel like all the time. So to not get what you feel like is sometimes a good thing for you. But a lot of people kind of act on emotion a lot of times. Another example of this. There's a relatively happily married couple. They have their struggles, but overall they're they care about each other, they love each other, they're doing okay, no major problems. And the husband has in his mind this idea of his marriage vows and his family and his care for his wife and his kids and so on. And let's say he's away from, he's on a work trip somewhere, and he sees some woman that he finds very attractive. And then maybe she's kind of being flirty with him, and now maybe he has this temptation to commit adultery, to cheat on his spouse. That's the same thing is happening. Now there's this idea that he has this wife that he loves at home, but she's not in front of him at the time. She's just sort of this idea in his mind. And the idea of his vows and the idea of his marriage versus this, right in front of his eye, he sees and, maybe he smells her perfume or he hears her voice. And so there's the sensitive appetite again, his passions, and there's kind of a conflict. And you would hope that he has the strength or the grace or the whatever you want to call it to do what's actually right, which is what reason is telling him to do. So now I'm going to add to what I was saying before. It is reason's job to perceive what's actually good. Once in a while, your senses, what they want, once in a while, what they want is actually good for you. Once in a while, man, I really feel like, I don't think I can ever say that I've ever really felt like a salad. I don't think in my 44 years I've ever had that feeling, but I can imagine somebody, man, I really feel like a salad right now. It's not outside the realm of possibility. And in that case, maybe, and then salad is, I suppose, good for you. In that case, what they feel like is actually good for them. I bet maybe that husband, hopefully he resists that temptation, and then later that day he's like, man, I just really want to see my wife, and I just can't wait to see my kids. There, his feelings, his emotions, are desiring something that's good, but very often they don't. And just because they desire something doesn't mean it's actually a good thing. Okay, so think of the fried chicken, think of the woman who's not the guy's spouse, whatever. You can plug in all kinds of things that you know, drug addicts or excessive alcohol or whatever. All kinds of things. There's this kind of tension between us. Now we're back to rhetoric. What rhetoric is, and this is all to answer number one. When are sometimes you might want to evoke emotions in people? When you want to evoke the correct emotion. Now, it might be alarming for you to hear the word correct emotion, but there are certain feelings that point us towards things that are actually good for us, and there are certain feelings that point us to things that are actually really bad for us. And again, you go back to all the examples that I gave you. And they could ruin our lives if we give in to them. I think addiction is the clearest example of this. I have a friend of mine, fairly close, who just kind of things got worse and worse and worse. And he's a fentanyl addict, and he almost died. He was in prison a lot, all because of this. That desire that he wanted, man, the last thing anybody needs to tell that guy is follow your heart, because his heart wants more fentanyl or heroin or whatever it is you want to plug in. Okay. So when are times when you might want to evoke emotions in people? You want to evoke emotions to help them make the reasonable or the correct decision. And because a lot of our soul is emotion, it's going to be really hard to say just by some act of willpower, I'm going to make the right choice, even though all my emotions or a lot of my emotions are pulling me in this other direction. It's you know, the mind, people are not usually just these purely intellectual beings, or not even mostly intellectual beings. So what you want to do as a rhetorician is use emotion to balance out emotion, and you use emotion that's on the side of what's reasonably correct to balance out what emotions just kind of in themselves are doing. And so maybe you want to talk. Maybe you're with your buddy when he's on this trip, and he's looking at this girl, and he's had a couple things to drink, a couple drinks, and that doesn't help at all. And man, he's really kind of leaning towards the temptation. And now he's like, man, what do you think? And you say, all right, I'm going to talk you out of this. That's absolutely a time to appeal to emotion. And how do you do that? That's what we're going to talk about today. All right. Now, when are some other times when you want? Well, you can also do that to yourself. Maybe you could be the person who talks yourself out of a bad decision. And, gosh, that chicken's looking real good. That pizza's looking real good. But, like, I already had a pizza yesterday, and I'm already feeling kind of bloated and dehydrated. It was salty. There was pepperoni, and I'm not feeling good already. But, man, it's looking good already. And you can talk. So one situation, one true, really valid scenario is you talk yourself out of something, and you get your own emotions to support what's the correct decision. Another one is you talk to a single individual, your buddy who's off on the work trip, whatever it is, something like that. Or finally, the intention that Aristotle really has in writing the rhetoric, you talk to a group of people that either you want to make a certain decision, or at least you want them to feel a certain way when you're giving a ceremonial speech. Okay, so let's go to page 121 of the PDF. Let's see. Initial questions to ask. What am I trying to say and to whom? That is, who is my audience and who do I want from them? Okay, so who are you actually speaking to? What emotion is appropriate to my subject? Okay, so then this is the decision that I think should be taken. What is the emotion that's going to lead myself, my friend that I'm talking to, or this group to what is the correct decision? How can I get them to feel that this is correct, not just know it is, but also feel it? And then third, how can I best bring about this emotion in my audience? So that's what we're going to talk about today. So the questions to ask are, what's the right decision? And the way you find that out is through reason. Like, let's think this through. What's actually going to be best for myself, for my friend, for the group that I'm talking to? What's actually best? You think it through. And I want to say this is actually very important. A big portion, I was talking about how emotional people are, but people are also reasonable. And sometimes sitting and reasoning with people and kind of like, look, let's look at the results of this. Let's look at what could happen. Let's look blah, 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 blah. Reasoning with yourself goes a long way. It goes quite a long way. It's not always enough, but it does help. And so give your audience, including yourself or your friend, some credit. Don't totally dismiss reason, but just realize it's not always strong enough. So then, in that case, I need emotion to sort of help get myself or my friend along to this right decision or to this. What's the emotion that will help me get there? Well, rhetoric is an art. It's not always this kind of analytical thing and you put in this equation and then at the end you get this emotion. No, you kind of develop a gut sense. You kind of learn it as an art form. And like, all right, maybe anger will get there. Maybe anger will kind of wake my friend up. And you try that out, and maybe it works, and maybe it doesn't. And then you try something else. Maybe fear will help you resist some temptation, and you get yourself to be afraid of something. And how do you? So then, finally, when you, let's say, I think this is the emotion that'll work. How do you bring about this emotion? That's what we're going to talk about a lot of today. Okay. So that's number one. Page 121. Now, how can you evoke ethos in someone? So ethos. This is the most important thing. So now he's speaking of ethos as an emotion, not just as character. Okay. How do you get somebody to trust you? Long story short. Okay. How do you get somebody to feel trusting towards you? This is the most important point I want to make about emotions. You cannot, at least usually, evoke an emotion by talking about that emotion. That is not how emotions work. Okay? Think about what an emotion is. It is the sensitive appetite. It is the thing that follows from a perception. I want you to think about perception for a second. Your eyes do not perceive themselves. They always perceive some object other than them. Other than themselves. The emotions that follow from sense perception, the sensitive appetite, works in the same way. You do not get somebody to be angry by saying, be angry. That's just weird. What do you mean be angry? It's kind of like, I don't know how many of you are Catholic, but in some Catholic parishes, there's like kind of a once in a while, actually this is probably common to a lot of Christian churches, you'll have like the musicians that are at Mass. I find this very annoying and I hope this is kind of going away, but I remember at some point in a lot of Catholic churches, there'd be the guy that's like playing the instrument or whatever at Mass, and he'll want people to sing along, and he'll be like, sing along, and he'll like kind of like bullying people to get to like, no, you don't do that. That you don't kind of directly tell people this is how you should feel. It doesn't work that way. Emotions just don't work that way. They are caused by an object. Just like seeing, what you're seeing is the thing that you're seeing. What you're feeling is the thing you are feeling it towards. And so in every one of these examples, number 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, all we're going to do is talk about how to evoke certain emotions. I selected the ones that I thought were the most useful. How do you evoke ethos? So trust in your character. Anger. How do you get somebody angry, or how do you get somebody calm? I think those are both useful. Friendliness, or feeling like an enemy. Fear versus confidence. Pity. These are the 5 emotions that I'm going to talk about. In every single example, it's not going to be, you guys should feel really sorry for this person. That's not the way it works. You talk about the object. And what is the object that evokes pity or that evokes fear? And that's all you talk about. You do not talk about the emotion itself. It's irrelevant. It's just a waste of words. Okay? So how do you get somebody to be trusting in you? The last thing you should ever say is, trust me. That's like a kind of car salesman kind of thing. And good car salesmen wouldn't ever say that, or at least that wouldn't be the main thing that they're arguing. So what's the object that evokes ethos? How can you make yourself the object that would be trusted? What are the things that makes a speaker believable? What is it that makes you believable? Number one, so I'm on page 121, second half of the page. Wisdom. So that means you have to know what you're talking about. You have to be an expert on the issue. Some of this is repetition from a few weeks ago when we talked about ethos. Virtue. A dishonest person might not say what they really believe, so you must be honest. So you have to be an expert on the issue. You have to be honest. And then goodwill, one who doesn't care might not make the effort to give the best advice. So you care. So you, again, I want to repeat something that I've been saying before. It's not you pretend to be this kind of person. I think most people can see through deception like that, or I hope they can. What I'm saying is, if you want to be believable, if you want to be an object that is trusted, you have to be wise and virtuous and have goodwill. You have to actually know what you're talking about. You have to actually be honest, and you have to actually care about the person that you're speaking to. And if you are those things, you will be the kind of person that is trusted. Okay? Now, here, I'm following Aristotle's ordering in the way he's writing this portion of the rhetoric. He says there are three things to understand and bring about an emotion in an audience. There's the state of mind, whom, that's the object that I'm talking about, and then the reasons, the things that cause the emotion. He does something kind of funny in the rhetoric. He sets up this pattern of three aspects of bringing about an emotion, but he doesn't always use them. And the one that ends up being the most important is whom, is the object. That's why I'm kind of stressing that at the beginning. Okay. However, the number one, the state of mind, is pretty important. If somebody's really just not in the mood to listen, you gotta respect that, and you gotta get them to the point where they are in the mood to listen. So, for example, you're selling a product, and I'm assuming it's a product you really believe in, but the person you're talking to, maybe you are wise, maybe you know what you're talking about, maybe you really are honest, and maybe you do care about the person you're talking to. But let's say they're just really tired, or they're really hungry, they're in a bad mood, they had a bad morning. Well, they're not in the state of mind to even perceive you however you are. So you have to kind of help them out of that mood. How do you do that? Well, if they're tired, you're like, you know what, I'm gonna talk to you later. You're not in the right space for this. We'll talk another time. You need a nap right now. And you go and you let them take a nap and you talk to them later. Or they're hungry, they have low blood sugar, they're in a grumpy mood. Let's go get a snack. Let's go get some tacos right now. Let's go get some fried chicken, And then when they're oh man, now I'm in a good mood. All right. You feeling good now? Let's talk for a second. And now you bring them up. So the state of mind is important in a kind of secondary way, but it's first in time. You got to make sure they're in the mood for it. Nobody likes to be sort of forced to think about something or talk about something when they don't want to. Okay. Never ever do that if you want to be persuasive. All right. So that is how you evoke ethos. You have to be that kind of perceived object. Wisdom, virtue, and goodwill. Okay. Next one. How can you evoke anger and calm in someone? So when would you want to evoke ethos and trust? Well, when you want them to make a certain decision in a deliberative speech. You're selling a product. You're trying to talk them out of something. You're trying to talk them into something. Fine. When would you want to make somebody angry? I think you might want to make somebody angry if you are the football coach and it's halftime, and and so you want to get them kind of you want to get your football team kind of riled up and kind of angry so that they can use that when they go back on the field. That's an example of that. Certainly a military commander, certainly somebody. I think this could be useful in political discourse, so to speak, where you want to get your voter base angry. I think this is very much misused and kind of excessively used in politics, but it is used there. You want to get them angry, like at the other side, at the enemy, things like that. Those are some examples where you might want to make somebody angry. Actually, sometimes anger can be used to snap people out of certain things as well. The guy that is tempted to cheat on his wife, that you're off on vacation with her or on your work trip with, I got to give him a name. I've used it. The guy is named Mark. Okay, so your buddy Mark, who's about to cheat on his spouse. Anger can actually help in that. So because certain moods are kind of incompatible with each other. Emotions can kind of diffuse other emotions. So the guy is in this emotion of kind of sexual desire. Anger can kind of snap people out of that. Anger and fear both can be useful for that. So anger would be, hey Mark, how'd you feel if Jessica cheated on you? You know, his wife's Jessica. How would you feel? And he would feel what? He would feel so betrayed and angry and hurt and sad and all kinds of feelings. And then that's a kind of eye-opening moment. You know? No, can you also talk to him about, no, you made your wedding vows and, you know, this is about purity and you shouldn't be impure and there's the nuptial meaning of the body and you do your theology of the body discourse to this guy who's like drunk and flirting with this girl. It might work, probably won't. But asking him, how'd you feel if your spouse cheated on you? Ooh, that is a slap in the face. Because that's anger, and anger is this thing that kind of wakes you up. It's an emotion that kind of bursts. So that's another possible time you might want to use anger. How do you do it? State of mind, being distressed or in pain. So what are you doing? Now, in the case of the football team, they're already distressed or in pain. They're ill. They're not ill, but they're needy, expecting good, but receiving bad. So you want to get your voter base, you want to get them mad. You remind them, you bring their attention to the fact that they are poor. And you say, boy, those elites over there at the other political party that's not mine, they're so rich and they're taking advantage of, they're the ones that are making you poor. Yeah, that's so you get them in that state of mind where they're thinking about some painful thing in their life. That's step one, state of mind. Who is it? So now we get to the object. Who is it that you're angry at? Again, you don't go up to somebody and say, you should be angry. You say, those who laugh at us. So, you know, those elites over there in so-and-so, they're laughing at you right now. Nobody wants to be laughed at. That is a very angry thing. They're mocking you to your face. You know what they said about you? They called you, what was the word? Gosh, it got her in so much trouble. Hillary Clinton called, when she was running against Trump, degenerates or something like that. I forgot the word she used. She called his supporters some word. And gosh, that was a bad idea. Because now, Trump and everybody, all of his supporters were like, oh, so they're speaking badly of us. You see it, and now it just kind of makes you more angry at the people that you feel like are already against you. Or they speak badly of what you love. Look at what they're doing. They're mocking your family. They're mocking your religion. And a lot of people really care about their religion, and they're mocking it. So again, the object is this person who is doing these actions. So you get the object in their mind, and you point out all these aspects of this object that you want them to get angry at, and oh boy, it works. Those we expect respect from, those we have done good towards. You know, you guys are paying your taxes, and look at what they're doing with so you're doing your duty. You're giving them your tax, and look what they're doing with your taxes. Our friends, this guy was your friend, and can you believe that he did this to you? Our inferiors, this guy works for you. He is your employee, and can you believe that this is how he treats? Whatever, you know. Those who forget us or are insensitive in any way, yeah. So it doesn't have to be always this malicious choice to hurt you. Just doing it out of forgetfulness can be pretty hurtful, and it can cause anger. Those who do not care or despise us, or do not take us seriously, they don't even think about you. Oh, you don't even think about me, that makes me angry. You know, so these are the objects of anger. It's amplified if this is done in front of those we respect or our enemy. And they did all of this in front of people that you care about and that you want to care about you. And now they're making fun of you in front of them. Oh, you see what I mean? He gives these different types of belittling, Contempt is when somebody doesn't care about you or what you love. Spite is when somebody deliberately hurts you. And insult is when somebody speaks in a way that shames you. That's fine. You can use any one of those. That's fine. More often than not, you'll want to calm somebody down. What is calm? He's given this kind of loose definition. It's the settling down of anger. Most of the time, somebody's angry and you need to talk them down. So here, the scenario is you're still with your buddy Mark, and he's drunk again. He's still drunk, and he's about to get into a bar fight because a guy had the nerve to go up to Mark and say, you know what? I think Avengers Infinity War is a terrible movie, and anybody who likes it is an idiot. Okay? And Mark just loves Avengers Infinity War. He thinks it's a great movie. And so he's about like, what? He breaks his beer bottle, he's about to shove it in the guy's gut. Okay? And your job is, oh, Mark, let's talk about this. So now you want to calm him down. How do you get into that? So this is number 3, second part. How do you evoke calm in somebody? State of mind. So how do you get them in the kind of first step towards calming down? Enjoying fun or pleasure at a party. Hey, Mark, we're having fun here, man. Look, and let me get you another drink. Maybe that's not the best idea. Let's get a hamburger. Let's get some dessert. You know, doing something fun, doing something you enjoy. Let's go for a walk. You know, let's go. You know, whatever. Let's go see that view you thought was a good view. Whatever. We're all having fun, being wealthy. Mark. So remind them. It's not that you make them rich. It's have them think about pleasant things. Mark, dude, what do you care about this? You're a multimillionaire. Think about these good things. Get them in kind of that state of mind. Hopeful. Dude, Mark, just one more day and we're going to be home. That's it. Get them hopeful. Revenged on enemies. So if somebody remembers some past slight and they get angry, like, dude, you already had your revenge. They already got their comeuppance. Time having passed, Mark, that was 5 years ago. It was 5 years ago that guy at that bar during our work trip said he didn't like Infinity War. You could let it go, dude. Pitying another, and you remember that guy? He was just like a drunk loser. He vomited later that night, and the next morning he feeling guilty for something. He came and apologized to you. He's like, I'm so sorry I ever dared say that about Avengers Infinity War. So this is the state of mind where you get somebody kind of more likely to calm down. Who is it? What's the object of the person what is the object that somebody would feel calm towards? Here's what you want to say. He didn't mean it. Those who did not intend to belittle us. He didn't mean what he said. He was talking about something. He was talking about something else. That's also called Avengers Infinity War. He wasn't talking about the movie. Those who respect us, dude, that guy loves you so. He respects you so much. That's not the guy. He's not the guy you think he is. Those who have repented, he was so sorry. Those who are saddened or distressed at their action, he was weeping he was sobbing, begging for forgiveness that he could ever dare have said that he didn't like that movie. Those who are humble, those who agree with us, and later he said it was the best movie ever, are inferior. So these are the things. He takes you so seriously. This is actually a very interesting one. Who is it that you feel calm towards? When people ask you a favor, this is a very interesting kind of psychological trick. When you ask somebody a favor, weirdly enough, if all things are kind of neutral, they end up liking you more when you ask them a favor. There's a kind of weird connection you have somebody when you ask them for something. It could be as simple as, hey, can you pass that salt and pepper down there? And they do it, and there's something that wasn't there before. And then I think Benjamin Franklin has this kind of one-liner, and he says, if you want to start being friends with somebody, ask them for something. And it's this weird thing when they do good for you, that action of doing something good, even if it's really small and silly, makes them like you more. It's sort of like a kind of the psychology might be like, well, I did good for this person, they must be okay, because otherwise I'd be dumb for doing good for them. You know? Here's an interesting one. Those whom we are afraid of. So here, Aristotle's making this point. Fear and anger are also those incompatible emotions. So if somebody's angry, you make them afraid, that anger is going to go away. This kind of happens in movies a lot, where, you know, the guy's leaning at the bar and somebody bumps into him. He's like, "What? Who bumped into me?" He turns around and the guy that bumped into him is like 7 feet tall and 300 pounds of pure muscle. And it's like, okay, I'm not angry anymore because the fear has taken it away. So that's an interesting one. The fear taking anger away. Those we admire, those who respect, and so on. So that's how you evoke calm in somebody. All right. How can you evoke friendliness and enmity in somebody? How do you make friends? And again, you know, you don't misuse this. State of mind, loving another, being loved in return, mutuality. See what I mean? The idea that there's three kind of aspects to it kind of goes away. That's kind of a meaningless thing. So I think Aristotle, I think here he really wanted there to be state of mind, whom, and reasons for all the emotions. By the time he gets to friendliness, he kind of like runs out, and he doesn't have much to say about state of mind. Who is it that we feel friendly toward? Who is the object of this perception? Those who share our pleasure and distress. This is so interesting. When you're becoming friends with somebody, even when you're dating, what is one of the first things people very naturally talk about? What kind of music you like? Music in particular, actually. Music, movies, things like that. What kind of books do you read? Why? Because I think it's very correct. When people like the same kinds of things that you like, it means they feel in a similar way that you do. And in particular, music. Music is a very direct kind of emotional thing. And if somebody really likes exactly the same artists and songs that you do, you know, that's kind of a pretty indicative sign that they feel their emotions are similar to your emotions. Those who share our distress as well. So it's not just loving the same things, it is hating the same things. Oh my gosh, I cannot stand. I have a friend, and we have some things in common, but she cannot stand the band Pearl Jam. And I actually kind of like Pearl Jam. I'm not like their number one fan, but I think they're pretty good. I think they're actually a really good band. She cannot stand any of their songs. So that's one thing. All right, that's one thing we don't have in common. We have all kinds of other things, but that's one thing. You know. But when people hate what you hate, oh yeah, you know what? I can't stand Pearl. You're right. That's a good point. You know, yeah, and it kind of makes you feel friendly towards them. They wish the same things. That's another kind of easy one. Oh, I wish that. Oh, you know, I wish that too, man. So we have this in common. Our benefactor. So if you want somebody to feel friendly towards you, you do something good for them. So you ask them for favors, but you also do something good for them. You're their benefactor, and they're going to feel friendly towards you, and it becomes this kind of back and forth mutual thing. Friends of our friends. That's another good one, because if I'm friends with this person, that means I feel similarly to them or towards them in a certain way. And if you're friends with them, all right, that means we have something in common as well, because we have this common friend. Enemies of our enemies, same thing. We hate the same people. That means our emotions are kind of harmonized, at least in that hatred. So what's the common thread of all of this so far with friendliness? It's somebody that is like us, similar to us in feeling. Now it goes to something slightly different. The generous. People like generous people. Even if you're not, you're going to like somebody who's generous. And even if the person you want to be friendly to you isn't generous, they will like you if you're generous. The brave, the just, the temperate, the pleasant. So these are just virtue. Just being virtuous in general will make people want to be your friend. The pleasant is a good one. So if you're just kind of pissy all the time, you're pissy all the time. Who would want to be friends with somebody like that? Be kind of pleasant, be more fun to be around. Okay. Those with a sense of humor. Make some jokes. If you're not good at it, well, my advice is I wouldn't try this if you're not very good at it. I wouldn't try it very often. Once in a while, there's some people I know that they're just goofy, but they're not funny. I don't know if that makes sense. But like about 3 to 5 times a year, they actually have a good one. Like, all right, I'm going to give you that one. That was pretty funny. Those who praise others. This is a really important one. If all you do is talk bad about everyone, nobody's really going to want to be your friend. If you have good things and nice things to say about people, That's going to make people want to be your friend. Those who take us seriously. So if you're one of these people that has to put people down to make yourself feel better, you're going to be pretty friendless pretty quickly. But if you take people seriously and they have an opinion, oh, you know what? I never thought about it. Tell me more about that. Oh, you want me to expand on my opinion. That means you take me seriously. That's a very complimentary thing. And it makes people want to be your friend. Those who are like us, I said that already. Those who are not ashamed in front of, so make people feel comfortable. If you constantly embarrass people, don't expect to be their friend. Those who join us in doing good. So you're working on something. Hey, you know what? Let me help you out. And those who are honest with us. That's a really, really big, important one. All right? Don't worry about the types of friendship. So these are the ways, again, you could see how useful and important this would be in day-to-day life. And much, including, I think, even in giving kind of big speeches. Enmity. Here, this is not even written in the text. If it's in italics in the PDF, that means I just took whatever was in the opposite one in friendliness, and I just wrote the opposite thing. Those who do not share our pleasures, wish the same things, are detractors, enemies of our friends. So it's basically the opposite. I'm not going to go much into it because I'm talking a lot today. So, all right. So that's how you evoke friendliness and enmity. Friendliness is all this. Enmity is the opposite. How do you evoke fear? Fear is another useful one. Again, it's useful politically. You should fear your enemies. It's useful when you're talking about the fried chicken. That aren't you afraid of blood pressure or even of, some people are vain. Like, oh, aren't you afraid of like gaining weight and then whatever? Some people are really invested in that. It's not the most important thing, but evoke that fear, and it can really snap people out of certain things. A very useful one, I think, in a kind of underrated way, is fear of hell. And ideally, people shouldn't need that. Well, you should do things out of love for God and out of love. You should do things just because they're right. Yeah, I agree. But like, not everybody's perfect already. Some people need some fear to get them in the right direction. And maybe the guy won't walk away from this temptation he has to commit adultery out of pure love for his wife. Maybe he's not in the state of mind for that, but he might out of fear. And the fear might be that she finds out one day. Or the fear might be that he gets a disease from this other person. Or the fear might be the fear of hell. And those might be the things that snap him out of it. And you kind of owe it to whoever you're talking to, yourself or the person or the group, to use that if that's what's needed. Okay. Now, how do you do it? Definition: pain or agitation in imagining a nearby future destruction or pain. State of mind: expecting some destructive or painful misfortune in the near future. Your wife's going to find out, you're going to get the disease, you're going to go to hell, whatever. Realizing one is capable of suffering. So if somebody thinks I'm just invincible, remind them, you remember you got COVID. Nothing says you can't get, syphilis. Knowing one can have bad fortune. Dude, bad things have happened to you. Remember that. That means that what are you evoking? The possibility, the mood that something else bad might happen. Again, should this be the reason people make decisions? No, but people are people. And sometimes this is what's needed. And including yourself. Reminding yourself of these things. Not having suffered much before. That's interesting. I think that's very interesting because it's kind of like this weird sense of justice. Well, everyone's going to suffer and maybe mine is about to show up if I do this. It's kind of superstitious, but I don't know, might snap somebody out of it. Not despairing of future rescue. This is very important, actually. People are not afraid of something that is inevitable. If it is a guarantee, they feel sad. They're afraid when it's possible to get out of it. So a lot, and I've actually run into this a number of times as a priest. A lot of people aren't afraid of hell because they are absolutely sure they're going there. And that's a very sad reality. And so in cases like that, the response that anybody should give is, what are you talking about? There's no guarantee whatsoever. In fact, the last thing that God wants is for you to go to hell. And he's going to do everything, again, if I can be a little bit religious here, And so to take that despair away from them will actually bring them back to, it's a wake-up call. And now, well, I might not go to hell. If I might not, now I'm afraid of going to hell because there's a possibility of getting away from it. And fear is an emotional bodily response, fight or flight, right? To get us away from some dangerous thing. If there's no way to get away from it, we're not going to feel afraid. But if there is something, if there's a possibility of getting away from it, that's when fear shows up. Okay. Realizing others greater have suffered and have from unexpected things and people. Well, it's not going to happen to me. It happened to that guy that's way better than you in every way. You know, you're not, so getting rid of that. So on the one hand, there's despair, where it's just definitely going to happen. On the other hand, there's arrogance and hubris. Take that away as well. Oh no, it's happened to people much better than you. Again, you're bringing them back to that fear. Okay, whom? Those who are able to wrong us. So who is it that people are afraid of? Those or those things that are able to wrong us. So I could be afraid of God, who is able, who has the power to wrong me. I could be afraid of, my wife, who could certainly hurt me. I'm not married, but talking to the guy. You could be afraid of some disease that's able to hurt you, whatever it is. Those who have been wronged. So don't piss off that dude, because if he's wronged, you should be afraid of him. Rivals, those stronger than we, those who attack the weaker, the calm. The calm is the funny thing. You should be afraid of people that are calm, because you never know when they're going to snap. Okay. That's kind of all I want to say about fear. How do you give somebody confidence? You give somebody confidence by... So when would you want to do this? I think it's actually pretty common. You want people to feel confident when they're about to take a test. When... I'm going to let you in on the secret. It's a real thing. When professors or academics or professionals in general feel not competent at what they do. It's called, there's a name for it. There's a really once in a while I forget really common words. Imposter syndrome. They feel like they're imposters, that I really don't know this stuff. I just pretend, and everyone's falling for it. If you're feeling in that mood, you might want to use some of this to talk to yourself, unless it's actually true. But in most cases, it's actually not true. Now, so let's say I was really nervous about teaching today's class on emotions and character. How am I going to talk myself out of that? Well, the state of mind that I want to be in is having often succeeded and not suffered. I've taught classes hundreds of times, and it's never gone, well, it's rarely gone badly. Actually, probably never it's gone badly. They're always okay. They're never awful. At worst, they're mid, and I'm okay with mid. I don't know if people still say mid by the time you're watching this video. It means mediocre. Okay. Escape dangers often, never having been put to the test, not knowing yourself. You don't even know what you're capable of, how much good you're capable of. Having the resources needed, you know what you're doing. Knowing others like you or inferiors are not afraid. Look at that schmuck over there. That guy's twice as dumb as you are, and he can do this. Of course you can. Having more at hand than enemies, being innocent. I don't know some scenarios that might be interesting. Being angry. So look what he's doing. One of the things that evokes confidence, which is the opposite of fear, is anger. So fear and anger. So fear can take away anger, but anger can also take away fear. You want to get somebody again, it's the football team during halftime or whatever, and they're afraid of losing to the other team. Get him angry. Anger can give you confidence. Who is the object of confidence? So you're confident towards those weaker than yourselves, lack of enemies or dangers that are far away. So you got this, dude. This class, this test, whatever it is, you got this. You're not the same person. You can do this, whatever. These are the ways to build confidence. I gave you, I don't have time for this, but I gave you a little selection from Hamlet where he is trying to make himself angry so that he can kill his uncle. And he's mad at himself for not having killed him already. It's an interesting speech. Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt. He's mad at himself. And he wants to kill himself. And then he's like, oh, this guy. And whatever. And then he gets himself mad at his uncle. And his mom, actually. Anyway. Then, a great scene. This is called the St. Crispin's Day speech from Henry V. This is another one evoking confidence in the army as they're going to fight, and he's kind of making them think about the victory that they have waiting for them afterwards. This is a brilliant speech. Yeah, I got to jump to one more thing. I want to talk about pity. So all these other emotions on page 146, 147, and 148 and 146, 147. There's kindliness, I'm not going to talk about because it's pretty close to friendliness. Pity, I'm going to talk about. Indignation, close enough to anger. Envy, close enough to anger. Emulation, close enough to friendliness. So those, read on your own, not that important. But I want to talk about pity. When do you want to get people to feel sorry for you or to feel sorry for something? Mostly when you want their money or some donation. How do you get people to feel pity? You get them to think they might suffer the same thing. You need to connect with other people and know that you're like them if you're going to feel sorry for them. Old age. When people are old or sort of relating to old people, they're more likely to feel sorry. Feeling weak. When people feel weak, they're more likely to sympathize with people who are weak. Education or experience. Why? Because when you've experienced this kind of feeling of weak. Having a family. When people have kids and they see something bad happen to a little kid, they just imagine their own kid there. It's like, oh my gosh, it hits them in a different way. Not being angry. So there's another opposite. Anger and pity go together. So you got to make somebody not angry if you're going to make them feel pitying. Or if you want to make somebody less angry, you get them to feel sorry for the person they're angry at. Remembering this happening to you or loved ones, thinking there are good people. Okay, who is it that you feel pity towards? Our acquaintances, people close to us, but not too close, because if they're too close, that's going to be fear, not pity. People similar to us in age or in character or habits or rank or birth. So when people are, in any way, if you can relate to somebody, even just as a human being, there are some people that have good empathetic hearts. All it takes is that it's another human being suffering, and they're going to feel pity towards them. For others, there has to be some common element that, oh my gosh, they're like me, and that makes me feel sorry for them. People just kind of have that little selfish element. Okay. I'm going to go a little bit more than an hour today, which is okay. I've gone short with other ones. So I do want to say this. The book of Job, which I'm giving you a couple pages of on page 150 to 153 of the PDF, is absolutely the most quintessential, perfect exposition of pity that I think you'll ever find in literature. Job is the best possible. He is better than anybody reading the book of Job, and the worst possible things happen to him. And it's as if to say, every good quality you see in yourself, and you think you're never going to suffer, the guy that has all those good qualities and way better ones is going to suffer worse than you could ever imagine suffering. And it evokes not just pity, but also fear. And also the question of the book of the Job is kind of anger towards God and how to counter that anger towards God. So the entire book of Job, there's lots of emotions going on. And it is a masterpiece. And you know what I'm going to do? I have a lecture just on the book of Job from another course. It'll be an optional thing. You can watch that if you like. But I think there's a lot of very interesting things to say about the book of Job regarding theology and stuff like that, and why would God allow bad things to happen to good people, including the best people like Job. But also there's a lot about emotions there, about fear, anger, and so on and so on and so on. Okay. Long story short, Job goes from being angry at God to being afraid of God, and that's a more correct way to feel. But you can watch that if you want. All right. Last thing, what aspect of the character of audience does Aristotle discuss? What might some other aspects be? Page 148. What does Aristotle really focus on? Age, youth, middle age, and elderliness. Young people, long story short, young people are impulsive. They act on emotion. They love money least of all. Young people, I got money, well, I'm going to buy something with my money. And so on. So you can see these columns. I'm not going to read it all to you. The old are basically the opposite of the young. The old are not as impulsive. They really take a long time to make decisions if they do them at all. They're more suspicious, whereas young people are more trusting, and so on and so on and so on. And then middle-aged people are kind of in the middle. He's probably right about this. I think it's kind of a good general kind of summary of things. How can you appeal to young people? So if your audience is really young, page 149, you appeal to their intense desires. You want to make friends, you want to have fun, you want to do this. That's what you want to talk about when you're talking to young people. If you're talking to the old, you're going to go, oh, you want to go have the time of your life? No, I want to sit here in my room and watch my TV and be safe. So when you talk to the old, that's what you want. You want to feel safe. You want to feel secure. You want to really whatever. That's what you talk. And then middle age, you talk about moderate things. That's great. I think that's fine, and it's an important thing. But the real thing he wants to talk about is the character of the audience. To know your audience. And again, what are some other aspects? How educated they are. How different they are between each other. If you have an audience that's just everybody, all kinds of people, well, there's kind of less that you can do. If you're talking only to people that are from Alabama that are in their 40s, okay, you actually have a lot you can work with there. They have enough in common just between those two things. If you're talking to all Americans age 18 to 65, that's a lot. There's kind of less that you have to say because they have less in common with each other. All human beings have certain things in common. That's fine. But the more specific your audience is, the more they have in common. Aristotle's point is use it. If you're talking to fellow students at your university, well, you have lots in common because you maybe live in the same place or whatever. So whatever you have, remember, rhetoric is the art of knowing what you have at hand and knowing how to use it. Whatever it is that your audience has in common, use that as much as you possibly can. Okay. Next class, forms of argument. And I guess I'll see you then. All right, minute 3. That's okay. It's not the end of the world.